Hello, everyone. And so I'll go through the recording. So this is recorded. If you want to look at the notes, they'll be on the wiki, and the recording I've posted also there. And you can look at the history. There's been some cool demos in the past. So if you're curious, you can find this there. And we start the meeting with doing intros and figuring out who's here. So we do a quick round of introduction. I call people as in the order they are on my screen, which is not always consistent in Zoom, but in the order I see them on my screen. And so can you please state, who you are, why you're interested in being here, and if you're new, it's totally fine to answer, just wanted to listen in, so don't be stressed about it. Hello, so on my screen, Pavel, you're the first one.
Hello, I'm Pavel. I'm software engineer at Getting Data, and I'm OpenLineage contributor.
So on my screen, I'm next. I'm Julian. I'm a chief architect at at Astronomer, and I'm the project lead for OpenLineage. Next on my screen is Ross.
Hello, I'm from the community team here at Astronomer, and I'm a committer to OpenLineage, and I'm always here to help the community.
Will?
My name is Will Johnson. I am an employee at Microsoft, and I'm an OpenLineage contributor. And then one thing I'm interested really in is, I think it's already on the agenda, but it's understanding the streaming approach. How are things going along those lines? Would love to understand where that has developed, since it's been like a few months since we last had it on the call, I think. So would love to know more about that. With me.
That's good. Next on my screen is Michael Robinson.
Hi, Michael Robinson, also on the community team over at Astronomer, and OpenLineage contributor, and I coordinate these meetings. That's me.
Next is Ernie.
Hi, everyone. Ernie Ostick, part of product management at Manta Software. We do Lineage, and we are continuing to learn more and more we can about OpenLineage in all ways that we might be able to integrate it. So, and take advantage and contribute back.
Nice. Next is Minkyu.
Hi, I'm Minkyu, and I'm a software developer at Astronomer and also a contributor of OpenLineage, and very much interested in this ecosystem. Yeah. Mike Collado.
Hey, Mike Collado. I'm a staff engineer at Astronomer and an OpenLineage contributor.
Willie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Willie. I'm a software engineer at Astronomer. I'm the project lead and co-creator of Marquez and committer to OpenLineage. So I'm interested in all the Flink work that's been going on. I know that's gonna be a topic. So Marquez has to most likely change the data model to support some streaming jobs and data sets. So looking forward to learning more about
that. Peter.
Hi, my name is Petr Hayek. I work for Profinit in Europe. We are in partnership with Manta Software, and I would like to become a OpenLineage contributor.
Nice. You're welcome.
Thank you.
And so now the next Peter, Peter Hicks.
All right, that's the first time for that. I'm Peter. I'm a software engineer at Astronomer, and I'm a Marquez contributor.
Colin Schaub.
Yeah, hello. My name is Colin Schaub. I'm here in lieu of David Checky, who I think posted a question in Slack a few days ago. We both work for Cargill, agribusiness based out of Minnesota, global. I'm a software engineer, and we are investigating OpenLineage, and we have a few POCs going with Marquez. Primarily interested in streaming approach, and as an add-on, we have a lot of document DBs doing data transformations. And I guess as an aside, I'd be interested in document DB approach involved in OpenLineage.
Okay. John Thomas.
Hi, my name is John Thomas. I am on the astronomer community team. I'm here to be present and help out where I can.
Mark Chiarelli. And
hi there, Mark Shirley. Hi there.
Sorry about that.
No, you got it. A consultant with Mark Logic and working with Colin at Cargill on their work they're doing there, and just interested in learning OpenLineage.
Welcome. Yeah, we saw a screenshot posted recently on the Slack channel. That was nice. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, Mark did that work. So
nice. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, that looks great.
Yeah, thank you.
Sam.
Hey guys, I'm Sam Holmberg. I'm also a software engineer at Astronomer. Fairly new to the OpenLineage community, hoping to learn.
Welcome. And last but not the least, Sandeep.
Yeah, hey folks. Yeah, I'm Sandeep, product manager at AWS. We're investigating OpenLineage, and I'd like to know a little bit more about how the facets could be made more extensible and how we can contribute to those. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm looking at the topics. So the topics that have been mentioned so far. So there's been streaming that came a couple of times, which is already on the agenda. So I think Colin, you mentioned document DB approach to OL, OpenLineage. And Sandeep, you talked about facet more extensible. So do you want to, I'll add those topics to the open discussion. And if we don't, we'll figure out the follow-up if we don't have even enough time to discuss all the topics we had today. Okay. Thank you. So the next slide is just reminding everyone like the various mechanism for communicating. So the main way of reaching out, asking questions is Slack. And of course, then we document through GitHub issues in the GitHub. There's also a mailing list that's more about posting announcements and things like that. There's a wiki, which has the notes for those meetings in particular. And Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, where you can either see the recording, see announcements about the releases or talks that are coming in the community. So in the agenda for today, we have listed, so I'll do a quick overview of recent talks that happened in the past few months for people who are interested, and there are usually recordings online about OpenLineage and the ecosystem. Michael will go over the latest release of OpenLineage and what's in there. Pavel will talk about the upcoming Flink integration. Ross will talk about the new doc sites for OpenLineage. And then there's some discussion topics. So I'll add to the list some of the topics we approached today. So when we get to the open discussion, we can talk a bit about some of the things that have been mentioned right now. So to start with recent talks, and the slides with all the links will be available on the wiki after the meeting. So you'll be able to find all those links if you want to take a look. There's been quite a few talks at the Airflow Summit. So that has been talking in particular about lineage related to Airflow. So Ross made a talk about data lineage and kind of all the underlying challenges with lineage and what everything it enables and things like that. There's a presentation about OpenLineage and Airflow. Willie had a talk where he talks about some of the use cases, what you can implement on Marquez and automating things thanks to metadata and understanding what's happening. Mike also had a talk about the lineage with Airflow and Spark. and Ross and Michael talked about an introduction and how to set up Airflow and Marquez, how things work together. Otherwise, I gave a talk about observability data pipeline for data pipeline with OpenLineage. So looking at the end-to-end ecosystem with Spark and Airflow and dbt and custom integration to show how those things happen. There's the recording online. And Mike also had another talk on Subsurface that talks about this cross-platform lineage, right? Really, when you put all those integrations together, that lets you see lineage across various different things. On that, feel free to go look at those talks. You'll have the links in the notes, and I'll let Michael talk about the latest release.
Yeah, thanks. So since the last meeting, we released 10.0, and haven't done this in the past, but I would encourage any authors who are here to chime in, if you don't mind, and add to my very brief, possibly incorrect description of your PRs. Some key additions to start with, over in the Spark integration, we improved coverage with 794 and 818. Pavel, does that sound about right? Anything to add?
Yeah, yeah. So we didn't deal well with a cached data set. So once you create a data set, cache it, and then write it somewhere else again, we lost the lineage, and now we track it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And similarly, in the Snowflake integration with 869, we added an operator to the list of operators and increased coverage in the Airflow integration. Did I say Snowflake? Sorry, not Airflow integration. Few things we added to CI. With 889 and 802, we added some static code analysis tools, and those incidentally are helpful in us meeting the expectations of the LFAI and data foundation. Similarly for 755, where we added copyright lines to the source files, it's another benchmark there of the LFAI and data. Some key changes in 10.0, with 828, we improved reliability in the Spark integration. And similarly, we reduced payload size and noise in the Spark integration. Does that sound about right, Mike?
Yeah, there were some issues where lineage events actually would fail to be sent because the payload was so large, and that's not 100% fixed. There are going to be edge cases there, but I think we hit one of the big ones there.
Yeah, actually, that's the 0 but yesterday we merged another change that creates a substring of a big serialized unknown entries. So whenever we had something really big that we haven't thought about before, it will not break the event.
Thank you, guys. And with 851 and 858, we improved testing in the Airflow integration. And then last but not least, did some refactoring in with 834 and 890 in the Spark integration. So thanks to all the contributors, and thanks to the authors for chiming in. That's our recent release.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And next, we have Pavel's talking about the status of the Flink integration.
Yes, so some time ago, together with Maciej, we started working on a Flink integration, and as an entry point, we created a simple Flink example app that reads data from one Kafka topic and writes to another. And we wanted to find out if we are able to dig into the Flink internals to extract the metadata about the processing. So to find out the information about the input and the output and be able to get the schema out of it. And it turned out we are able to do it, which was pretty big success to us, although it requires a lot of reflection. So reading the objects within Flink that are not exposed through the public API, but we're able to do that. Later on, we're also, Maciej was also trying to read data from Iceberg. So there was such a requirement to be able to extract information when reading from Iceberg source and writing to Iceberg sync. And Iceberg sync part is still not ready, but Iceberg source is ready. Flink provides two APIs to read and write from Kafka. And one of them is the legacy based on Flink Kafka consumer and Flink Kafka producer. And although it's a legacy, it's still widely used by many applications. So we are also able to read metadata from those approaches. We created integration tests for all those use cases, and we created the Circle CI to make sure that integration tests are run whenever we want to merge anything. Some time ago, with an OpenLineage Java client, we created a new client which can have configured different transport ways, like send to HTTP endpoint the event, send it to Kafka cluster, and within Flink integration, we switched to this new OpenLineage Java client so that we are able easily from within the Flink integration part to decide where to send the event and in which way. Yeah, we are also able to extract the information about the checkpoints. So whenever Flink does something, it writes a checkpoint that some offsets on the Kafka had been read or written. And at that time, we trigger sending of an OpenLineage event. We are also able to collect information when Flink fails and send a fail event. So actually, we are able to retrieve, to get a lot of information out of the Flink job. The big missing or the important missing feature is make sure that crash in Flink integration does not kill the Flink job. And it's the, I would say, the most important and the last story issue remaining. To write some tests to make sure that whatever we do in our Flink integration jar, it will not break the processing. Yeah, yeah, we're just missing the test for this. And once it's tested, we are thinking of writing the README file and releasing this as an experimental version. Yeah, so during this experimental version, we didn't think a lot on representing streaming information in OpenLineage events and the philosophy of streaming in OpenLineage. We mostly focus on answering the question, are we able to extract those information from Flink? Because we had different trials in that and we found it difficult. Yeah. And the answer to this is yes, we are able to extract some basic but still essentially useful information like the input, output, and the schema of the data sets. And this looks like a great first step to publish the experimental version, get the feedback from you guys, and proceed further. That's the plan, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. Any questions?
I have a bunch, but go ahead, Will.
I had a simple one. I had a very simple one. So Pavel, when you said in your discussion there that you guys created a Flink, I think you said like a Flink jar. So the code that you guys are doing, is it ultimately an extension of OpenLineage, or will it be integrated into OpenLineage directly, like most other? Well, I guess yeah. Is it a Flink? It's a Flink separate integration. Is that correct? And are there any changes to the OpenLineage client or the OpenLineage spec to support? So no changes to the spec, no change to the client. It's a brand new integration that would be like independent, like the DBT or the Snowflake and Airflow and all that. Okay, That's what I make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think it's going to be very similar to the Spark integration, right?
Got it.
Obviously, Flink has a different mechanism for that.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Thank you. All right. To you, Willie. Go for it.
I'm glad you went first. So that because my question was, were there any changes to the Open Lineage schema or the spec itself? The reason I asked that is most likely, so when the when the Flink job starts, does it send a start event, and also you get the inputs and outputs and the name of the job, and then you talked about checkpointing. So as the Flink job is running, what's the states that's sent over with the checkpoint details, or are they sent over? I think there was some discussion, maybe there's a new state that needs to be added, like an ongoing run state.
Yeah, unfortunately now it's other, because it's the state that describes whatever else it is. And we are sure it's not, it should be changed and some new states should be added. It's just as I said, at first when we focused on digging into the Flink stuff and trying out what can we extract out of it, and I'm really happy that you state this question, that you both stated it, and I hope to get some feedback from you guys and opinions on how should it be made.
Good, we have a lot to say. I'm looking forward to that. I have some opinions.
Okay, if there's no more question on this, I'll move on to Ross's topic about the doc side. Thank you very much, Pavel. It was a very thorough, very detailed, interesting. Looking forward to it.
Okay, if you don't mind, let me share my screen really quick. I want to show a few things. Let's see. So, I've been working on a new doc site, and the reason is because up until today, documentation for OpenLineage has generally been found here on the website or spread throughout a whole bunch of like GitHub READMEs throughout the repository. And that's okay. It's a place to start, but it's not ideal. And so I think we ought to have a separate doc site, one that can change a little bit more frequently, one that we can all collaborate on. So I started on something, and right now it's just a skeleton. But what I've done is set up a Docusaurus deployment, put it into a docs repo inside the OpenLineage organization, and I've just kind of made a bunch of page stubs and made a sort of organization. And then where I've had resources that exist already, I've kind of put them in. And then I've tried to add annotations to the top of each page that lets someone know what the status of the page is. So this is at a point now where I think it's ready for folks to collaborate on. And so I would like to make sure everybody's aware that this exists. And as you kind of click through, this may or may not be the right structure. I would encourage us to propose changes to the structure and all of that. By the way, this isn't live yet. Right now I'm staging it on like one of my servers. But once it gets to the point where we feel like it's feature complete, we can host it at docs.openlineage.io. Looking at the GitHub repo for it, it's openlineage/docs. Really simple and straightforward to get this up and running, but all the docs are right here in the docs directory. They're all in Markdown. If you've used Docusaurus or Doxy or something like that before, you're familiar with doc sites, but really you can just contribute stuff right in here. Everything's Markdown. Directories directories turn into trees here on the left, and it's pretty straightforward. Another reason I think this is important. Last meeting, Kabula presented a presentation, which was an integration that doesn't have any open source code components. And so there isn't a GitHub directory where they would put a README for it. And so it created this question of where does this integration get documented? So anyway, this is kind of the answer. So this is an invitation to folks. Issues, pull requests are welcome. Issues are also welcome. This is an open repo now. And I guess our next milestone is when we all decide that we should publish it. And that's what I wanted to show, just make everybody aware.
Nice.
Yeah, if I was going to make one suggestion on the guide, because the guides that you had are awesome. Most likely defining your own custom facets should probably be on the guide there, because we get so many questions around that. Like, how do you define them? How do you eventually process them? Because yeah, I think there's a lot of questions around extending the core model.
Yeah, feel free to add. Incidentally, if you think a page is needed, but you don't have time or headspace to write it, feel free to throw in another stub. You know, like copy and paste what I've been doing in the other stubs and throw them in. Like that is a totally reasonable contribution to make, I think. Yeah, we also need a frequently asked questions there. So I'm thinking I might create a frequently asked questions page, and then we can all just kind of add stuff to there as well. Sorry, Julian, what were you saying?
Yeah. I was just thinking how do we integrate the JSON schema of the facets and a kind of thing that integrates nicely in this documentation. Because we can add more like in the facet documentation, there's description fields and so on, right? So being able to integrate that would help answering a lot of questions there are about facets. Like currently, we kind of point people to the JSON schema, which is not the easiest to read. So, and there are tools that can translate that into a more like doc-friendly representation. So yeah,
I have some mixed feelings about like the automatic doc string into docs thing. It can work really well if the doc strings are well curated and all of that. I think it can also lead to a bunch of super expansive, low quality docs if it's done wrong. But I'm with you. I think it'd be a good thing to pursue.
Yeah. That's where, like we should open tickets whenever the descriptions are not good enough in the facets, and like use the hammer of like, let's get the docs strings to the right spot.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry, go ahead, Willie.
I'm just going to mention, I think we could do a lot better job at describing some of these facets, because some of it just says, I don't know, they're fairly basic. I can't think of something off my head, but they could be a lot more descriptive. Absolutely.
I think if we make them more visible in the doc side, that would be a good incentive to make them better as well, right? Like it's kind of naturally people will ask questions. We say, okay, we need to, right now they're kind of a little, you need to go read the schema in the JSON, right? So it's kind of not ideal. So yeah, this is awesome.
But I think so the next milestone is when we know it's ready to publish. And then I think another milestone in the future is what you mentioned, Julian, is figuring out the spec and like all the JSON schema. There's a whole bunch of auto-generated content that needs to also live in either the OpenLineage website or the doc site or somewhere. And I think we just need to figure out like, how does CI put it in the right place when new releases of OpenLineage get built? And so I think that's also in the future for us.
Nice. Yeah, I think that would be a really great for this.
Mm-hmm.
And do you see this as something? Okay, so there would be a part of the website of the doc website could be per release then, because those things get tagged and released, and so as of that version, this is what the thing looks like.
That is another thing to think about. I've been recently working with the Airflow website and the Airflow docs, and they're a couple years down that path, and they have a giant like pile of old doc build. It's like, yeah, I think we should start building multiple versions of the docs for multiple versions of OpenLineage. I'm not sure when we should start doing that. Maybe we should start doing it now. But anyway, that there's a complexity you introduce with that.
And it's work, right? It's kind of
yeah. But yeah, so I'm going to be looking to that point. I'm going to be looking for signs that like people are suffering from finding the wrong version of the documentation.
Okay. Yeah, just starting with the latest version, I think, is already a big thing, and it's very useful. And so we can, make this incremental.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions on this? So thank you, Ross. And moving to the next point. So Will, you wanted to talk about streaming services in the Flink integration. I think we answered some of your questions already, but what else do you want to talk about?
So the only other thing to add was just, has there been any more thought on the changes to the OpenLineage spec to support streaming, right? Because last time we talked, there was, do we really want to send messages every single micro batch, like say in Spark, right? Pavel, you've been doing a lot with Flink, so maybe there's a different model. Maybe they do faster. So like, okay, I think the consensus was we know we don't want to do that. Do we want to send a message on, just the initialization and just the close of the stream. So I would love to know if that has been discussed further, either on the Slack or on other discussions or internal, any other progress on that model that we plan on going down for OpenLineage.
So currently there's this notion, so there's a start event from when the job starts, and you capture what the current version of the job and some of those aspects, and there's going to be a complete event when the job terminates. And we looked into sending events for snapshots in the Flink in between, right? So, and I think one thing we discussed, and after that I let Pavel give more color to this because he's way more in the weeds than I am, is that we talked about, if people set snapshots every minute or every 10 seconds, that's probably too many events for the purpose of Lineage. Right, we care more about figuring out how the shape of dependencies between data set have changed, but snapshots are useful. So we've been talking about maybe limiting this to a certain number of events per amount of time, right? So you capture like X snapshots per hour or something. But I'm not sure if we made a lot of progress on that end yet. And so the same would apply, I think, on the Spark side. And we could consider, there's the fact that it started and it ended, because it's really useful to know, even if we see streaming jobs that are constantly running, they're actually not running forever. People redeploy them every 2 weeks or something when, libraries get updated or framework gets updated. And so they do run for a certain amount of time, and then they change, and there's a new version of the code, right? Which is an important thing to capture. Like we stopped it, there's a snapshot that had been saved, we restarted it with a new version of the code or things like that. And having a certain number of events in between that show like progress, right?
Got it.
But I think things like, for example, if people want a continuous metric on how far behind is the streaming job from the tip of the stream they're reading from, for example, typically people use more like time series database for that, right? So there's kind of like a difference between capturing lineage and the shape of things, and actually more operational metrics like constantly, where people use monitoring systems that look more like service oriented solutions to capture where we at and so on. But on that, Pavel, do you want to add on this or maybe contract some of what I've said?
Yes, so you're right. So when we start the Flink job, we create a separate thread that is polling some internal Flink API to identify the amount of checkpoints written. And if it's changed since the last call, then the OpenLineage event is updated. Definitely, it's worth at least giving configuration ability to limit the number of events so that the user can specify send me an event every minute, every 5 minutes, not to get flooded with them. I'm not sure if we've done that already or not, because that's the basic. It's the easiest thing we can do at the beginning, and then think of it next.
Does just a question on Flink itself? Does it support sending, like you have one stream? Does it support sending out events to multiple tables, for lack of a better term? Right? So for example, I've had customers who have we have one event source, but we want to bifurcate the stream into different tables. One is customer transaction, the other is, I don't know, customer updates, right? So it's two separate tables that are actually getting updated, but it's one stream of events. So in Spark, we can do that with the batching of, or not the for each batch. Does Flink support that? And does the model that you guys are thinking of support, hey, this lineage, while at one point in the snapshot, it has been sending to just this one table, but in the next snapshot, the majority of events have been going to this other table. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I thought it's just two different outputs of the same job.
Okay.
I'm not sure how the checkpointing will work. Is the checkpoint because the checkpoints are just for the input events, and we always have a single input. Yeah, anyway, it will be good to have integration tests for that to see that once we have two outputs, there are two. Once we have two, let's say, Kafka topics with the data written to, we get two outputs in OpenLineage event.
Okay, but ultimately, then, based on what you're saying, Pavel, is that we wouldn't change anything in really. It's just, hey, this bifurcated output is just two outputs. It's just two outputs in the normal OpenLineage event. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's a big concern.
So the OpenLineage model does enable multiple inputs and multiple outputs. So, you know, in a lot of cases, there's a single output when it's SQL, or Spark often is a single output, right? But actually, the model does support multiple outputs. And in the semantics of the events, one thing, so if you look in the spec, actually, we do discuss the semantics of sending multiple events with more outputs showing up, right? So we said the semantics are, you just combine all the outputs, like you imagine when the job's finished running, and the actual lineage is the union of all the outputs, right, of all the events. So you could send an initial event that has some output, right? And because the job has not returned to this other topic just yet.
Okay.
And as we go and we write to new topics, we can send more events. So maybe in the snapshot events or some other that will add more outputs to the output section of the OpenLineage events. And in the end, in Marquez, so Marquez being the reference implementation of this, Marquez will combine all those outputs in the job, right? And so this is the semantic. So you can, because sometimes you can statically know what the outputs are going to be. So typically in a batch job, at the beginning of the job, you already know what the outputs are going to be through the plan, right? Or in SQL, similarly, right? But sometimes you don't, right? Depending on how, you know, if the job is a little bit more opaque, or there's not this logical plan that takes statically where all these outputs are going to be, you may discover more as the job is running. And so the goal is to capture that information as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's perfect. I look forward to seeing that documented on the new doc site that Ross brought up. That's going to be great to see. So thank you for the explanation, guys. That was my big questions around streaming. So I'm all set here. So thank you all for that great feedback.
Yeah, I put an item on, I think, a lot of those principles or the philosophy of how we capture streaming jobs. We do need a separate doc, right? There's how it works for Flink, but we need kind of this generic doc that will apply to both Flink and Spark and all of this.
That'd be wonderful. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for asking the hard question and forcing the explanation of those topics.
And it's recorded too. So yes, gotcha. Haha.
Documentation. We just put the transcript on the doc site. I think that works. No, just kidding. So on that, thank you. So we'll go to the next item of open discussion. So I've written down 2 items, but maybe I'm missing ones, right? So we had Colin, and so there's been some comments in the chat about using DocumentDB for storing things. Right, so Colin, did you want to like talk about this? And the other item, so before we get started on that, the other item, I think Sandeep had some question about how to make facets more extensible for their AWS use cases. So let's start with Colin, and then we talk about the other one. And sorry, before we get started, am I forgetting anybody else? Is there someone else who has a question they want to ask or something to be clarified? That's it? Okay, so let's start with Colin.
All right. I turned on my camera too, so I'm a face.
Nice beard.
This is 2.5 years of COVID beard, so
looking good, looking very good.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think actually your discussion of Flink, I think it was, that clarified a bunch for me. Like, generally speaking, like it's a number of events issue. Like, we don't want to overload Marquez or the OpenLineage API endpoint with just a barrage of like, I got one, one single message, one message. And so again, it's just what's the logical approach so that you don't overwhelm, the back end with lineage events. And we had actually come up with something similar because we're using MarkLogic, which is a document database as a back end. We are dumping, some number of documents into MarkLogic, and then we have a mapping, deduping process to take data from disparate data sources, find similarities, and then map and merge them into a final data set. And so we have multiple inputs coming in via streaming, and we also don't want to like initiate that mapping, merging, deduping job with every new document that lands. And so, even our backend, we don't want to overwhelm it with like single message events. And so we're essentially batching or caching in an adapter layer that feeds from Kafka, and then waiting until, we have enough documents that's, enough to process. And then we essentially like tell MarkLogic to go, start your mastering process. And it's similar to the way I think you described the Flink process, where you're kind of you're waiting for a checkpoint, and then you're telling the process to go. And then again, like we're kind of bodging, like when the adapter spins up, it says, I'm a streaming adapter. Like I'm a job, right? I'm a streaming job. And then every time it says, every time it writes documents, it just says, I'm a job run. And I've completed. And then MarkLogic will pick that up and say, all right, I'm going to start mastering. Take the job run as like, no, I'm a child of the job run, and then start mastering the documents. And each step can then say, I'm a child, job run of the previous job run as you go. And that's essentially how we got that diagram that David Checky posted in I think it's the Marquez Slack yesterday afternoon. So that's our approach. And I think it might come down to documentation or just, best practices, but yeah, like what are other people doing? And, does that sound right?
I think that sounds
so,
great. Yeah, go ahead, Pablo.
Yeah, that looks really good. And I also had a look just in the code to see how we are doing this. So we poll the amount of checkpoints, and it contains a number of in progress, failed ones, and the total amount of checkpoints. And we only create an OpenLineage event and send it once the amount of total checkpoints has changed. Yeah. So we are not blindly sending the same event every 10 milliseconds just because it's configured like this. Yeah. So we're not that stupid, but still, in some use cases, you want to configure to make Flink save the checkpoints really frequently, and you still can run into a lot of events. Yeah, so an extra throttling will be necessary. Yeah, but just wanted to mention that it's not that we send totally the same events all the time. They are different, but they can be slightly different, like in the terms of total checkpoints process. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, we should, it would be great to what you just described, Colin, we like maybe add it to the documentation website as one of the integration explaining how it works. And I think for OpenLineage, like we need this more generic documentation on how, and we've been talking about this, how people give guidelines and help, people understanding how to do this in general. Right. And I think if we want feedback, I think Will can also tell you about how Microsoft has been ingesting OpenLineage into Purview.
I just dropped it in the chat, Julian. You're a gifted mind reader. So Colin, that's we are doing this exact same thing where we're not going to Marquez, we're going to a Microsoft product instead, and that is we have to consolidate all of the events from OpenLineage. We learned that the hard way, is that each event does not give the complete picture. So we are more stupid than what Pavel has described, because we do send the same event over and over again if there is indeed something happening, and I think that's causing us some issues, right? So we need to batch up and potentially cache some results and then compare and contrast them. So we're doing a fix to do exactly what you guys are thinking of. So you guys are ahead of us. but just
Right.
again, some sample code right there for you to take a look at, say how are we looking at those events, and then how are we determining that yes, we've got a start event, we've got the end event, they're both on the same run ID, both for the same job namespace. Mike Collado was a huge help for us to understand that as well. So yeah, just something for you to browse.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, we'll take a look. And then a note, kind of going back to Ross, community outreach guy, documentation stuff, great. Documentation feedback as a I don't know, consumer of OpenLogic and Marquez, it'd be awesome to see like example payloads. Because a lot of times I find myself reverse engineering, like, what's Marquez doing behind the scenes, or because we're trying to pipe these events out of MarkLogic, which is not really a true Open Lineage participant, right? There aren't libraries for MarkLogic. We're kind of reverse engineering what does the message look like, and then we're sending that to Marquez. So payload examples for streaming, et cetera, would be spectacular.
Yeah, there are payload examples kind of spread out, but it'd be cool to have them like in one place, like here's like all a diverse set of examples of what payloads could look like.
Yeah, right. And yeah, so I've actually been combing through the unit test just to see what the payloads look like.
Yeah, the integration test contains some example payloads. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's inventive, but you shouldn't have to do that.
Nice. So thank you very much for the feedback. Sorry, just moving on. I want to make sure we have time to answer Sandeep's question as well.
Yep.
This was great feedback, Colin. I think we're looking forward to chat more on the Slack and help you in any way to make your integration successful.
Yeah, thank you. We're excited about both Marquez, Open Lineage. It's going to help us a lot.
Nice. Thank you. Sandeep, did you want to elaborate a bit on what you needed about the facets being more extensible?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to ask this question. Yeah, we've been investigating the Open Lineage and the facets, and kind of trying to understand how we can kind of have custom facets which can bring the richness which some of our system in AWS are have. Like for example, like the data quality metrics, right? It's that facet is a pretty good one. Good, I would say, good starting point. Allows you to understand the nulls, distincts, and a few other attributes, but does not really map all the things that we have in AWS systems. So wanted to understand your perspective on how we can go about it.
Yeah, so you have two options, right? So of course, so anybody can create custom facets without asking permissions from anyone, right? So that's useful in a way that makes you experiment and try things easily, and Marquez will store any of those facets. So of course, the UI doesn't have anything specific for those, but they will be stored and they will be consumed and they will be available, as connected to the metadata or specific version of a job and so on. And the way you do this is you pick a prefix that's unique to you. So I don't know if AWS or something, and then you prefix all your custom facet with this unique prefix that prevents, collision from a namespace perspective with the official facet. That being said, you're very welcome for things that are generic, like this notion of data quality metrics, right? Mm-hmm. And like you said, it models certain thing to a certain point. But if the things you have in mind are apply more broadly to the ecosystem, right, and there's not specific to AWS in particular, mm-hmm. I think you're very welcome to suggest either extending the data quality metrics facet that is existing, we can add more fields, more details to the facet, or creating a new one, if there's like different concepts at play. So that's, like there's a certain number of facets in the spec at the moment, but the whole point of facets is to make it easy and flexible, make the spec very flexible, and to have more, there could be, for example, there could be more than one notion of schema, because table schemas look different from Avro schemas, or depending on what people are doing, right? So this is very on the table as well, right?
Okay, fantastic.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, so is there any use case in particular you have in mind around the data quality or something?
Yeah. I mean, I think the key use case for us is kind of how would the customer come up with some generalized rules and kind of automate those rules, and have these assertions and the quality metrics, which is more extensible. So yeah, maybe I'll take a shot of your second option that you suggested. And,
yeah, you can open a proposal issue, right, and describe what you would add to that facet, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I think we can modify facets and add optional fields to them, And I think I've heard from someone else, for example, we don't describe the rules themselves in the data quality metrics facet. We describe the metrics, right? And we have the name of the rule and whether it passed or not, but we don't describe the rule itself in a standardized format. But I've heard from someone else this week that this would be a useful thing to add.
So yeah, sounds great.
So that'd be nice. Well, thank you, Sandeep.
Thank you.
And yeah, looking forward to your contributions then. Awesome.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks.
So we have 3 minutes. Any last questions, thoughts, someone wanted to add? This is your chance. Don't be shy. We'll be silent until someone is uncomfortable enough that they'll speak up.
3 minutes of silence.
You need elevator music, Julian. Unlicensed elevator music. That's what we need.
That's nice. Okay, on that. So thank you all for joining and contributing to the conversation. And we have this meeting monthly. If you want to make sure your topic gets discussed, Michael pings the community on the Slack channel the week before to collect topics, so that people know about them ahead of time, and we can prepare. Otherwise, it's also okay to bring up your questions at the beginning of the meeting, and we save some time in the open discussion part of it. Thank you all. See you next month, and in between, see you on the Slack channel. Bye-bye.
Excellent meeting.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Bye. See you.